Listen to me. There will come a time when everything around you collapses, when you pray and heaven seems silent, when you do right, yet you're met with pain instead of peace, when you obey, yet doors slam shut in your face. And in that moment, the temptation will come, so strong, to question God, to think He's forgotten you, to believe that somehow His promises were only for others. But I tell you, that's the very moment your faith is tested, not in the sunshine, but in the storm. You say you trust God, then trust Him when you cannot trace Him. Trust Him when your understanding fails, when your heart is breaking, when the night seems endless. Faith isn't proven when everything makes sense. Faith is proven when nothing does. Anyone can sing when the music is sweet, but true worship rises from the pit, when tears fall and you still lift your hands and say, "Though He slay me, yet will I trust Him." Do you understand? God is not obligated to explain Himself to you. He is not a servant of your understanding. He is God, sovereign, holy, wise beyond measure. You see the moment, He sees eternity. You see pain, He sees purpose. You see delay, He sees preparation. You cry out, "Why?" and He whispers, "Wait." And yes, it hurts. It feels lonely. You wonder if you've been forgotten. But listen carefully. The silence of God is not the absence of God. The darkness you feel does not mean the light has died. He is working even now, weaving glory out of your sorrow. The very thing you think will destroy you, He will use to sanctify you, to make you more like Christ. Don't you dare let go of Him because you don't understand His ways. Remember, the cross didn't make sense either. The Son of God hanging there, forsaken, crushed, bleeding. What sense did that make? And yet through that agony came redemption for the world. If God brought salvation out of that, do you really think He can't bring purpose out of your pain? So stop demanding explanations and start trusting His character. He has never lied. He has never failed. He has never once broken a promise. He is good, even when life is not. He is faithful, even when you are faithless. He is God, and that is enough. True faith is proven in darkness, not in comfort. It's easy to believe when the path is smooth, when the blessings of God seem to fall one after another like gentle rain on a fertile field. It's easy to talk about faith when the bank account is full, the body is healthy, the prayers are answered, and the people around you are kind. But that's not where the authenticity of faith is revealed. Real faith, the kind that anchors the soul and glorifies God, is not formed in the sunshine of ease, but in the shadows of uncertainty. It's in the dark, when every visible reason for trust seems stripped away, that the heart either clings to God or crumbles. When the light of understanding fades, when you can no longer trace what God is doing, that's when the true measure of your faith is exposed. Anyone can declare, "God is good," when life feels good. But what about when your prayers go unanswered for years? What about when obedience brings loss instead of gain? What about when you walk through a valley so deep that you can't even see the other side? That's where faith ceases to be a theory and becomes a lifeline. Faith is not meant to merely decorate your theology. It's meant to hold you when nothing else can. There are moments in the Christian life when God seems distant, even silent. You cry out for direction, and the heavens offer no reply. You seek comfort, and all you feel is the weight of loneliness. You do what is right, and the outcome looks wrong. In those moments, you will be tempted to believe that something has gone terribly wrong, that perhaps God has turned away or forgotten your name. But He hasn't. That's the furnace of faith, the place where belief is purified and all self-reliance is burned away. You see, comfort doesn't challenge your faith, it cradles it. Comfort allows you to remain as you are, untested and unchanged. But darkness forces you to decide what you truly believe. It forces you to dig deep and ask, do I trust God because of what He gives me, or because of who he is? When the gifts are gone, when the blessings are withheld, when the dreams die, will you still cling to the giver? That's the question every follower of Christ must face. Faith is not the denial of reality, it's the defiance of despair. It's the stubborn confidence that God is still who he says he is, even when everything around you screams otherwise. The darkness is not an accident, it's an assignment. God allows his children to walk through seasons of confusion and pain so that their faith might be refined, not destroyed, but deepened. He knows that superficial faith, built on emotions or circumstances, will collapse under the first wind of adversity. So he takes us into the storm, not to drown us, but to teach us to stand upon his promises. The disciples learned this lesson on the sea. Jesus was in the boat, asleep, while the storm raged. The waves crashed, the winds roared, and panic set in. "Don't you care that we are perishing?" they cried. And Jesus arose, rebuked the storm, and then turned to them, not to comfort their fear, but to confront their unbelief. "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" He was teaching them that his presence was enough, even when he seemed silent. The storm wasn't the problem, their fear was. They saw the waves and forgot who was in the boat. That's what darkness does. It exposes what we truly see. In the light, we can talk about God's power and goodness with ease. But in the dark, our words are tested. Do we still believe that he is faithful when the outcome is uncertain? Do we still worship when the blessing is withheld? The darkness strips away our illusions and leaves us with nothing but God himself. And there, in that sacred emptiness, real faith is born. Abraham believed God, not when everything was clear, but when it made no sense at all. He was told to leave his homeland without knowing where he was going. He was promised a son when his body was as good as dead. And when that son finally came, God asked him to lay him down. None of it made sense. But Abraham believed, not because he understood, but because he trusted the one who gave the promise. His faith wasn't built on explanations. It was built on the unchanging character of God. That's faith proven in darkness. Consider Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, sold as a slave, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. For years he suffered injustice and silence. No visions, no angelic messages, no divine updates. Just chains and confusion. Yet in all of it, God was with him. Behind the scenes, through pain and betrayal, God was weaving redemption. Joseph's faith was proven not when he stood in Pharaoh's court, but when he sat in that dark cell and still believed that God had not abandoned him. Faith doesn't grow in ease, it grows in struggle. Like a tree that drives its roots deeper during drought, faith grows stronger when the waters of comfort run dry. The dark seasons force us to depend on God in ways we never would otherwise. You begin to pray differently, to worship differently, to see differently. You stop relying on your feelings and start relying on his word. You stop looking for signs and start standing on truth. You realize that trust is not a feeling, it's a choice, one you make again and again in the dark. There is a kind of Christianity that only seeks God for what he gives. It's shallow, fragile, and easily offended when life turns hard. But true faith, faith proven in darkness, does not demand explanations. It rests in God's sovereignty. It says, I may not understand, but I know him. I may not see the way, but I know the one who leads. It's a faith that worships even with tears, that obeys even without clarity, that stands even when trembling. Job understood this. He lost everything, his wealth, his children, his health, and still he declared, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. That's not poetic exaggeration. That's a soul stripped bare before God. Job didn't deny his pain. He didn't pretend it didn't hurt, but he refused to let the darkness dictate his theology. He anchored his soul to the truth that God was still righteous, still wise, still worthy of trust. That's faith proven in darkness. We often think faith means feeling strong, but real faith often trembles. It doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers. Sometimes faith looks like crawling when you wish you could run. Sometimes it looks like tears falling on an open Bible, words read through blurry eyes. Faith doesn't erase fear, it resists it. It doesn't erase confusion, it chooses trust in the midst of it. It doesn't demand light, it walks forward with what little light it has. The darkness will test every part of you. It will test your prayers, your patience, your theology, your worship. It will ask you, is God enough when nothing else remains? And the answer to that question will define your entire life. Because when the lights go out, when the applause stops, when the blessings fade, what remains? If your faith is built on circumstances, it will crumble. But if it's built on Christ, it will endure. Faith proven in darkness doesn't just endure, it transforms. It changes how you see the world, how you respond to suffering, how you relate to others. You begin to recognize that the purpose of life is not comfort, but conformity to Christ. And Christ himself was no stranger to darkness. In Gethsemane, he sweat blood. On the cross, he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Yet even in that agony, he trusted the Father's will. If the Son of God was perfected through suffering, should we expect anything less? The darkness becomes sacred when we realize it's the place where God molds us. In the silence, he teaches us to listen. In the confusion, he teaches us to depend. In the pain, he teaches us compassion. And in the waiting, he teaches us endurance. Every moment of shadow is an invitation to deeper intimacy with him. You begin to see that the darkness you feared was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to reveal him. Faith proven in darkness is not loud, it's steady. It doesn't always have the answers, but it holds to the anchor. It doesn't always understand, but it refuses to let go. It's the faith that says, even if the fig tree doesn't blossom, even if the vines bear no fruit, even if the fields yield nothing, I will rejoice in the Lord. That's the kind of faith that shakes hell and honors heaven. Comfort may bless you, but darkness will build you. Comfort may soothe your emotions, but darkness will strengthen your convictions. Comfort may teach you gratitude, but darkness will teach you surrender. When God leads you into the dark, he is not being cruel. He is being kind, because he knows that faith proven in darkness produces a depth of trust that cannot be learned in ease. So when the night falls, don't panic. Don't think you've been abandoned. Lift your eyes and remember that the same God who rules the daylight also rules the night. The stars you see only shine in darkness. So does your faith. God's greatest work in you often happens when you feel least aware of it. The darkness you dread may be the very soil in which God is growing your deepest roots. Faith proven in darkness doesn't come naturally. It's forged. It's refined through tears, prayers, and perseverance. It's learning to say, Lord, I don't understand, but I trust you. It's learning that God's goodness is not dependent on your comfort. It's learning that he's still working when you can't see his hand. It's learning that the darkness you walk through today is preparing you for the glory you'll see tomorrow. So when you stand in the shadows and your heart trembles, remember, this is where faith becomes real. This is where it's tested and strengthened. This is where it ceases to be a word and becomes a witness. The world doesn't need to see Christians who trust God only when life is easy. It needs to see those who trust him when life falls apart. That's the kind of faith that points to a real God, a God who is worthy to be trusted, even in the dark. God's silence and confusion do not mean his absence. There will come seasons in your walk with him when it feels as though heaven has gone quiet. You pray, but there is no response. You search the scriptures, but the words seem lifeless. You go to church, but the songs sound hollow. You wonder if something is wrong with you, if somehow you've been disqualified, if God has turned his face away. But listen carefully. Silence is not abandonment. The confusion of your situation does not equal the absence of your Savior. God may be silent, but he is never still. He may seem hidden, but he is never gone. This silence of God is one of the greatest trials a believer can face, because it confronts the very core of faith. We love clarity, we long for answers, we want to feel his presence and hear his direction. Yet God, in his infinite wisdom, sometimes chooses to remain quiet, and it's in that quiet that the heart is tested, not in the noise of activity, but in the stillness of waiting. When all you have is his past faithfulness to cling to, will you still trust his present hand when you can't see it? That's the question that defines whether your relationship with God is built on emotion or on faith. Throughout Scripture, the saints of old walked through seasons of divine silence. Abraham waited decades for a promise to be fulfilled. Joseph languished in prison for years, wondering if his dreams had been lies. David cried out, "How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever?" Even Jesus, hanging on the cross, felt the crushing weight of silence as he cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" If the silence of God reached the Son of God, how can we be surprised when it reaches us? Yet in each of these stories, the silence had a purpose. It was not a sign of neglect, but a stage for glory. God's silence often reveals the motives of the heart. When he stops speaking, do you still seek him, or do you seek another voice? When his hand no longer seems to bless you, do you still worship him, or do you withdraw? Silence exposes what truly sustains your faith. Are you in love with the gifts or the giver? Are you trusting his plan, or only your understanding of it? When God is silent, you find out whether your relationship with him is built on convenience or covenant. There is a holy mystery in divine silence. It's not the silence of disinterest, it's the silence of instruction. Like a teacher during an exam, God often says nothing, not because he's absent, but because he's watching you apply what he already taught. You've heard his word, you've seen his faithfulness, now comes the test, and in the test he doesn't disappear. He observes, he refines, he deepens your dependence. You may feel abandoned, but he's nearer than you think. When you walk through confusion, remember this: God's plan is not dependent on your comprehension. He is God. He sees the whole picture, while you see only a fragment. The confusion you feel is not chaos to him. What looks tangled to you is perfectly woven in his hands. You may not understand why he delays, why he closes doors, why he allows certain pains, but one day you will see that none of it was wasted. God does not make random moves. He is purposeful in his silence, intentional in his confusion. His ways are higher, and though they may wound your understanding, they never betray his goodness. Consider Job. In a single day he lost everything: his wealth, his children, his health. And what followed was not an immediate explanation from God, but silence. Job sat in ashes, surrounded by confusion and pain, searching for answers that didn't come. Yet in that silence, God was doing something far deeper than Job realized. He was revealing himself, not through explanations, but through revelation. When God finally spoke, he didn't explain why he allowed Job's suffering. He revealed his sovereignty, and in that revelation, Job's heart found rest. He said, "I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you." That's what God's silence does. It moves you from hearing about him to truly knowing him. Sometimes the silence of God is the only way he can quiet the noise of our own hearts. We live in a world filled with distractions, voices, and opinions. We cry for direction, but we rarely slow down enough to listen. So God, in mercy, withdraws the sense of his presence to teach us to seek him, not merely for answers, but for himself. The absence of feeling is meant to awaken deeper faith, not extinguish it. He hides his face to make us hunger for his glory. He withdraws the comfort of his voice to make us lean on his word. It's important to understand that God's silence is not a punishment for his children. For the believer, Christ has already taken the punishment on the cross. God's silence is a form of discipline, not condemnation. Discipline refines, condemnation destroys. God's silence is never meant to push you away, it's meant to pull you closer. It teaches you to stand on what you know instead of what you feel. It strips away spiritual dependency on emotions and teaches you endurance, perseverance, and trust. You might say, "But I can't feel him. I can't sense his presence." Feelings are not faith. Feelings change with the weather of circumstance, but faith holds fast when the skies are dark. The Lord never promised constant emotional comfort. He promised his presence, and that promise does not depend on how aware of it you are. Whether you feel him or not, he is with you. Whether you hear him or not, he is speaking through his providence, through his word, through the stillness of your heart. Think of a seed buried in the soil. To the seed, it feels like darkness, like suffocation, like death. But in reality, that hidden season is the beginning of life. The silence of the soil is not the end. It's the womb of transformation. God's silence works the same way. You feel buried, forgotten, alone. But God is doing something unseen. He's growing faith beneath the surface, preparing a harvest you cannot yet imagine. When you finally emerge, you realize that the darkness wasn't your grave. It was your garden. David's life offers another example. Anointed as king, yet hunted as a fugitive, he spent years hiding in caves while his enemies ruled the throne that was promised to him. He cried out, "Why do you hide yourself in times of trouble?" But through every silent night, God was shaping a shepherd into a king. The silence was not rejection, it was preparation. God's quietness in David's life built endurance, humility, and dependence, qualities essential for the man who would lead his people. When God is silent in your life, it often means he's preparing you for something greater than your current strength could sustain. There's also a form of silence that comes when we've been faithful and obedient, and still everything seems to go wrong. You pray, you serve, you wait, and yet no change. It's then that doubt begins to whisper, maybe God isn't listening, maybe he doesn't care. But that's a lie from the pit of hell. God's silence is not neglect, it's divine timing. He hears every prayer the moment it leaves your lips. His silence is often the space between sowing and reaping. Farmers don't plant a seed and demand fruit the next morning. They wait. And in that waiting, though nothing seems to happen, life is forming underground. God's silence is not inactivity, it's incubation. And sometimes the silence of God is his mercy shielding you from what you are not yet ready to receive. You ask for clarity, but if he showed you the whole plan, you might run from it. You pray for promotion, but if he gave it too soon, it would crush you. You long for the relationship, the ministry, the breakthrough, but God, in his wisdom, withholds until your heart is ready. What feels like divine delay is often divine protection. He's not ignoring your prayer, he's aligning your soul. There are believers who walk away from God because they can't handle his silence. They equate silence with absence, confusion with abandonment. But that reveals a shallow understanding of who God is. He is not a genie to be summoned by prayers. He is the Almighty, whose wisdom cannot be questioned. Faith is not proven by how quickly you receive answers, but by how steadfastly you trust in the waiting. The strongest faith is forged in the stillness, when you keep walking even though the path disappears beneath your feet. Sometimes God is silent because He's already spoken, and you haven't obeyed what He said. Why would He give you new direction when you haven't followed the last one? Obedience opens the ear to divine instruction. Silence can be His gentle way of turning your heart back to what you've neglected. Go back to the last word He gave you. Return to the last truth you ignored. Often, the key to ending the silence is found in repentance and realignment. In confusion, the human heart wants control. We want to map the outcome, to predict what's next. But God's silence reminds us that He is God and we are not. It breaks our illusion of control. It forces us to surrender not just our plans, but our understanding. The confusion becomes sacred ground when it drives us to our knees. You may not know what He's doing, but you can know that He's good, and that's enough. Faith doesn't demand explanations. It clings to His character. God's silence also deepens compassion. When you've walked through seasons of unanswered prayer, you begin to understand others who suffer in the same way. Your pain becomes a ministry. You can look someone in the eyes and say, "I've been there. I've wept those tears. I've felt that silence, but God was faithful." That kind of testimony carries weight because it's been proven in darkness. The silence that once felt like punishment becomes a gift you can use to comfort others. And here's the beautiful truth: God often breaks His silence in ways we don't expect. It may not be a booming voice from heaven. It might be a verse that suddenly pierces your heart. It might be a song lyric that feels like it was written for you. It might be a quiet assurance that settles your spirit. Or it might simply be peace, the kind that surpasses understanding. When that peace comes, you realize that God was never absent. He was guiding, guarding, and growing you the whole time. There's a tenderness in divine silence that we only recognize in hindsight. When you look back on the seasons that confused you most, you see how God's unseen hand was holding everything together. The timing you once questioned becomes the wisdom you now praise. The pain you once cursed becomes the place where you met Him most deeply. Every unanswered prayer, every confusing delay, every moment of silence, each one was a thread in a tapestry of grace. So when you find yourself in that place of silence and confusion, do not despair. Silence is not the language of absence. It's often the language of love. The God who seems silent is the same God who promised, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." He cannot contradict Himself. His silence is not a gap in His presence. It's an invitation to deeper faith. When the heavens seem closed, remember, the God who is quiet is still the God who holds the universe together. He has not stepped off His throne. He has not forgotten your name, and even when you cannot hear Him, He is still speaking through His sovereignty, still writing your story, still guiding your steps with unseen hands.